Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sitting Ovation, a podcast about who the interesting people who work in theater are, what they do, and why they do it. We're your hosts, Bailey Sheehan,
Elizabeth Miller,
and Matt Faragasso.
We'd like to welcome you to our show, but before we get started, we'd like to take this opportunity to respectfully acknowledge that we are hosting this podcast from the traditional lands of the Lenni Lenape people, and we pay our respects to elders both past and present.
Today, you'll be getting to know Mark McKenna. Who is Mark? What does he do? And why does he do it? I'll kick us off with our first question. How did you get started in theater? Was this a burning passion for you? Was it always a straight shot to the arts? Or did you climb over mountains to get there?
Wow. The origins of my theater life. Wow. Well, I was lucky enough to be cast as Christopher Columbus in fourth grade in Mrs. Linderman's play that she wrote. And that was a lot of fun. I didn't really do too much. I did a fifth grade play, I think. And but then I got really committed into theater when I joined the University of New Hampshire, and I went to school, and I thought about majoring in theater then. And so, yeah, a very scholastic beginning. Though I was lucky, growing up in New York City, my mom and dad, they were kind of Broadway fans. And so I got to see shows from time to time, both off Broadway and on Broadway. And that kind of feeling of the lights going down and people being right in front of you and really playing for you and hearing the story, that was a lot of fun. So that was a big influence too.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your role as Christopher Columbus? Was it the moment that you were like, I'm going to do theater for the rest of my life? Did you love it? Did you hate it?
Yeah, well, the biggest memory, I tried to dodge it. The biggest memory.
Can't dodge anything here.
The biggest memory was at the end of the show. I had to give back, I think her name was Katie. I had to give her tights back, because Christopher Columbus wore some red tights and kind of, one of those frock kind of things with a belt. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't have tights. And so I had to borrow, Katie had to bring them in so Mark could wear her tights. And then my mom washed them after the show. We were done. We did 2 shows and she put them in a brown paper bag and said, give these to Katie, Mark. And I was so embarrassed. I didn't have any lines with Katie in the show, and she didn't sit next to me, and she had this red hair and she was kind of cute and everything. And it was so embarrassing for a fourth grade boy to give a girl her own tights back. So they kind of hung out in my desk for a long time. I just never gave them back. It was just awful. I don't know if she was missing them or whatever, but.
Right. To this day, no one knows, right?
If Katie's listening right now, what would you want to say to her?
Katie, I'm sorry. They were only in the desk. Nothing else happened.
They're not framed over the mantelpiece or anything. No, they're lost in eternity.
Yeah.
So you end up at the University of New Hampshire. Were you a theater major? How did you find your way back into theater?
Well, when I was in my first week there, I grabbed my roommate and I said, hey, let's go over to the theater and see what's going on over there. Because I had this inkling, maybe, this might be something interesting to do. And we were greeted there. And I was there for a summer session, actually. And so UNH at that time had a summer stock situation going on. And we just happened to walk in on the first day when everybody was preparing or just performing back their audition materials to everybody. And we were invited in by Dr. John Edwards, said, hello, what are you doing here? Oh, we just thought we'd walk around. Well, come on, have a seat. And so he took us into the Hennessy Theater. And so it was just this dark place with, you look up and there are these lights there and just this feeling, this warm, textured, wonderful space that was, you could see the dust flying sometimes, but the sound was different. And it was like, I was really captivated by that. And we just sat and we watched people make each other laugh and perform. And And then it was time for us to go, and we left. And that made me go back and try and take an acting class. And I took an acting class as a freshman. I got cast in a show, The Indian Wants the Bronx by Israel Horowitz, a wonderful, fun one act. I didn't have any experience. I don't know if I put Christopher Columbus on the audition sheet. But
Was this at college?
this was at UNH my freshman year, and I did say on my audition sheet, I live in New York and I went to school in the Bronx.
In the Bronx.
And I got in, and so the rest is history. I was bitten.
Has this career taken you? Where have you gone with this? What have you done?
Well, so I really loved theater. I thought that, by sophomore year or something, maybe I'd like to make this a career. And growing up in New York, I met a lot of actors, dancers from outside of New York who were thrilled to be in New York, even if they were working with me at the Haagen-Dazs. Or, waiting tables, tending bar. And I thought, wow, there's just a lot of out of work actors around here that are just so happy to just be in the big city. And I'd lived in the big city all my life, and I didn't want to do that. So I thought, well, I wonder if you can do theater other places. So by the time I was a junior, senior at UNH, I had this idea that I would like to join a company. And ART and Trinity Rep had sent touring shows through UNH through their presenting series. And I got to hang out a little bit with actors from those places. And I'd always ask the same question in workshops. I'd say, if I'm really good enough, will I work? That's what I want to do. I didn't want to be famous or anything like that. I just wanted to work. And I liked this idea and these stories coming out of being in a company, working with a group of people over time. And so I got out of UNH, and my parents had moved from New York to Philly. I started auditioning around in Philly. I'd go to New York a couple times for auditions, but I was always keeping my eyes open. And one day in backstage, Touchstone Theatre in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, an ensemble theater was casting. And at the same day, at the same time, the Philadelphia Children's Company was casting. And I had those both auditions in about the same week. I went out, I met people, I did my auditions, and I got accepted to both places. And I had a choice.
Right. That's always fun.
It was.
It's always good to have choices, right?
Oh, man. And, I picked Bethlehem over Philly. It was pretty cool because Bill George had, after I interviewed with everybody, Bill George kind of took me around a little bit, and he showed me the old Protection Firehouse on East 4th Street. And there it was, this firehouse that they had just purchased. Touchstone's board had just gotten together and they purchased it for something like $70,000, even cheaper than that. And he said, yep, right here, that's going to be our theater. And I looked at that building. I was like, yeah, make a theater out of that. And I'm like, man. And then, but he had just such confidence and such cool calm about it. It's like, yeah, we're going to, and I had auditioned in their garage. It was a touring company at that point, Touchstone. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'll check it out. Well, within 6 months, the theater was built. We had a capital campaign. No, it took about a year and a half to that, but the capital campaign really kicked in, and it was like, this is great. And I after a year there, I said, I think this could be my artistic home. I loved Bethlehem. I loved the idea of what we were doing, and the people and the work was just really fun.
They're a very physical ensemble based company, right?
Yeah, Touchstone has gone through a lot of evolutions, and it actually started at Lehigh. At the time, in the sort of middle beginning of its sort of early childhood, it was a nonverbal touring theater. And their idea was to do universal theater that could be unbound by language. And so I had no mime training whatsoever. I could run around in basketball shorts. They threw a unitard on me at the audition and said, move to this music with us. And somehow they hired me.
You channeled the red tights from years
I was just
before.
going to say, yeah.
Oh my
Was
God,
it a red
Haley, I
unitard?
never thought of that. It was. Thank you, Katie.
I was embarrassed before, but embarrassed no longer.
I now embrace the red tights. Right?
It just opened up for me. You just saw that you missed me in my life. That's how I'm here. Oh my God.
Has your career taken you outside of the United States at all?
Well, after we were at Touchstone, I think 86 to about 90, about 4 years at Touchstone. And in the midst of those 4 years, I got married to Jenny Gilrain, who was a company member there.
You got to tell the romantic story about how she hired you.
Well, it was the tights, I guess.
It was the
I don't know. They did. Susan, Bill, and Jenny were auditioning me, and we got hired. And after about 6 months to 9 months, we were kind of, no, 9, that's a bad. I'm not trying to, nothing like that. But we decided we would get married. And we did get married. And then we felt like we needed a little more training after a while. Doing this devised theater. The people weren't using that term yet, but we were talking about actor-creator, and we'd gone to all these festivals in Philly. They used to have the Mime and Clown Festival. So we heard about the Lecoq School in Paris. People went to study with either Lecoq or De Creux. And Marcel Marceau was kind of fading out at that point. But these two kind of French mimes you would go to their school and they would teach you in French. We had the wonderful privilege and gift from Touchstone of them saying, yeah, Mark and Jenny, go off to Paris if you can afford it. And we will hire you back if you make it through the 2-year program. Because that school was very famous. You would go, famous for, you go there. And after 3 months,
was that it?
Up the stairs. Nope. Everybody goes one by one up the stairs, knocks on Lecoq's door. Come in. No, he doesn't say come in. Entre. You sit with Monsieur Lecoq, and he says, oui or no. And some people pack their bags and have to leave or find another school to go to.
Okay.
So being married and a couple.
Yeah.
Is
there a plan?
Doubly nervous. What if you get in and I don't? Oh, no. Well, we both got in. And then after a year, same deal. He cuts it even more steeply. And but we survived for 2 years. We made it through. And that was a lot of fun. So that's the extent of my global travel.
Did you know French before you got there?
Oh, there was a wonderful community member named Donna Hartman, very involved in the community. I think we met her through Lepoco. She was a French teacher at, I think, Moravian Academy. We knew her, and we got a chance to do French with her for about, 6 or so months. Every week we'd go to Donna's kitchen and we'd speak French. And I think there was some sort of exchange. I hope she got free tickets or something. Mm-hmm. But it was really wonderful. And that prepped us. I learned my verbs. I learned enough verbs to have fearless French as my as Jenny's roommate and good friend before we moved in with each other, Jo Claire Hartzig, who ran the homeless shelter at New Bethany Ministries then, where we volunteered sometimes. And she said, Mark, you have fearless French. Because I would just talk about how, because, in Paris or a lot of foreign countries, if you don't speak their language, they kind of default. Okay, dummy, we'll speak English. But I never let them, I always insisted. So I don't know if they understood me, but I kept trying.
Were classes taught in French? Because I feel like that's a whole nother... You don't even just have to know your verbs. Like, that's a whole nother level of comprehension.
Yeah. And we were prepared by a lot of former students. I mean, there was a lot of like, what'd he say? What'd he say?
Okay.
But, a lot of the students, thank goodness, another privilege of being an American in the globe is that a lot of people learn English. And so the Japanese person sitting next to me or the Norwegian person sitting next to me would know enough English to be able to translate if I couldn't. And there was a lot of nudging. Mm-hmm. They taught class in English for 1 week, and then it was all in French. And, we got by. And so, it's amazing what the words are important, but as we knew at that physical theater, communication is more than the words.
So before we get too far in that, for all of our listeners who might not know what the type of clowning and mime work that you do, can you just give us a summary? I feel like a lot of people are imagining like circus clowns and things like that. If you could just tell us about like what clowning is.
Sure. Thanks, Bailey. Well, the Lecoq Theater really emphasized physical theater styles based on the observation of movements. And one of those theater styles is clown, also commedia dell'arte, melodrama, different kinds of mime, cartoon mime, pantomime blanche, and always creating original work, not working with scripts. So sometimes we forayed into Greek tragedy and did tragic hero speeches and so forth and worked with the chorus. But the clown is this idea of the soul innocent who meets an audience and is not sure what to do. One of the first exercises at Lecoq School is when we start the clown is you enter the circle and you have to make everyone laugh. And often they don't. Or people start making people giggle and people politely laugh and stuff like that. And so the clown is really trying to find that being in each of us, that being in you when you're that clown faced with the audience, of just being there and being in the moment, and really experiencing the communication by doing things and trying. A clown tries and fails, and in that failure, they find wonderful solutions that no one would ever think about, and a wonderful journey of play, of play. Le jeu, as Lecoq would always say. And so I was fortunate after getting out of the Lecoq School to continue to work with other people who worked with Lecoq or came at it from different angles. So Philippe Gaulier and Avner Eisenberg, Christopher Bays, most recently. These folks are really great. And it's not my sole exclusive thing. It's one of the things I do, but I love it. And I'm teaching it now. So
if it's not the only thing that you do, what other avenues of this is in your skill set?
Yeah, well, as we've talked a little bit, creating actor-created work or performer-created work, devised work, collectively created work. I love doing that, and I love working to use theater to kind of build community. And we did some wonderful things at Touchstone, like the Steel Bound project, or the Steel Festival, the Don Quixote project, Another River Flows, big, huge community building projects. And then another thing that I think is really important, and I've been able to do a lot in theater, I started doing at Touchstone and helped generate a lot of the educational programs, and then have continued after leaving Touchstone to be what I'd call a teaching artist. And not me, a lot of people, there's a thing, you can be a teaching artist. And teaching artist, someone who works in their art form, but also has enough of an educational background, develops it to bring that art form to other contexts and other fields where people can learn those subjects, those things, through experiencing the skills of the art form. I think being a teaching artist, being a community builder, a relationship builder, as well as a creator of art, whether it's directing or acting or being some sort of doing my part somehow, like editing film, like I got to do with Bailey here at Lehigh, doing Seen and Heard, which was a wonderful piece that happened this past fall that Cassie Johnson led. And what a privilege that was to be part of a community of, was it, I don't know, maybe 40 women who Cassie, called out to, and they answered and told what need to be said at that moment. Love letters, really, right? It was a love letter to Black women, for Black women and the people who love them. So we all fell in love with many people during that piece. It was a great example in this Zoom on the screen, but of asking people to create, to communicate with story, bring everybody together. So I got to edit a little bit, just a little bit, and help maybe organize just a little bit on that. And that was a lot of wonderful, wonderful fun.
I like how your theater arc started with playing Christopher Columbus, who is, like a racist genocidal maniac, to like a digital love letter to Black women. Like, what a journey.
How about that, right?
Progress.
Progress. I always teach it has to progress. Beginning, progression, end. Thank you. Yes, that is a wonderful progression, isn't it? Oh my gosh, thank goodness.
Speaking of progressions, you mentioned the Touchstone Lehigh connection early on in your career. You've mentioned one now. How and when did you get involved with the Department of Theater at Lehigh, and where are the various intersections that's found its way into your life?
There are various and many of them. Two strong ones are through Gus Ripa and Cassie Johnson. Gus was on the Touchstone board way back in the late 80s and early 90s. We got to do a number of works with him. We did a piece called The Voice of Souls. Touchstone plays Shakespeare's sonnets. And sonnets are a real close love of Gus's. He uses them in his classes a lot. So we did that. Also, he was instrumental in Bound and kind of the idea of that piece. And then Cassie was a student here at Lehigh. And then as she came back here, she was starting, as many people know, the whole hip hop theater movement that she has, she's been a part of and helped really emphasize here at Lehigh, and how that has really grown as a community and as a way for learning, for student learning, for education, people to express themselves through that art form. And she hooked in with us a few times and worked at Touchstone as an actor with us a few times. There's a lot of overlap, and the Touchstone Ensemble early on got to be do an ensemble-led acting Theater 11 class. We all did that with Gus. So those students got 4 teachers, kind of like, wow! It was a lot of fun.
And you had a festival with Lehigh, a little partnership with LeCoq and Bridget George. Yeah.
When Jenny and I got back from the LeCoq school, one of the first pieces we created was a piece called Don't Drop Grandma, and Gus was our director. The impulse for this piece we decided would be the set. And so Jenny kind of fell into being the set designer and was reading a lot of Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And we created, she said, I see a lot of dirt and vines. And so we went searching around, and Gus had a great exercise. He said, let's go around the Lehigh Valley and find environments that really inspire us. And so one of the places that Jenny took us was to these vines on the towpath right down by the Lehigh River on the other side. And so these vines. So she got Rob and Cheryl, who are working with us, our tech director and stage manager and others. And they grew out these vines and got them in the van. And then the next thing we knew, a dump truck showed up with 4 cubic yards of top dress mulch, or I don't know how many. It was a lot. And so our theater was, I don't know, 2 feet of dirt just filled the theater. And my entrance was really fun because I was a zombie well before The Walking Dead. And so I got buried under that dirt before the house opened.
Oh, man.
And I had a hose. And I stayed there, sort of hearing the audience through the dirt for about a half hour, so that when the lights went up, and I can't remember what the beginning moments were. I think, Eric Beatty had a monologue, and then I rose from the dirt as a zombie. And that was a wonderful surprise. One of my most favorite ever. I earned that, sucker. I earned that. And anyway, that was an awesome piece, beautiful. And it was our entry. Bridget George was really thrilled with the kind of transformation that happened with Jenny and I, and hearing all the stories of all the companies that came out of the Lecoq School. And so she masterminded a collaboration with Lehigh and a few other venues to bring about 7 different companies from all over the world whose members or some members studied at the Lecoq School. And so we got to do that for Lecoq back in our hometown, and he loved it, and we were thrilled about that. You know, that is a theater has always been a way where Lehigh is connected with the community. Back when Touchstone started, its genesis was in the Lehigh University improvisational street theater troupe. And a man named John Pearson was brought here to Lehigh by Frank Hook, who was in the English department and who loved to have Shakespeare productions from time to time. And he brought John Pearson in, who was this gangbusters, crazy, awesome, just intense man who was full of energy and transformed the engineering house. I'm going to get this wrong.
Is it
the
Wilbur?
Powerhouse?
Wilbur?
Yeah, I think it was called the Powerhouse at one point, and it might have been Wilbur.
I think it's Wilbur Powerhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they've combined.
Okay. All right. Well, so he, had folks come in and wash the floors before every class, and just really intense, and come in, and you can't come in and start talking about what happened. When you enter, you do all your small talk outside, you come in the door. And so really intense, but at the same time, so open. And he created this improvisational street theater troupe that would go through the town in the summers doing bilingual theater for the bilingual neighborhoods here in Bethlehem. And then the casts were made up of high school students, local teachers, professors, and staff at Lehigh, as well as teachers from the Bethlehem area school district, and Lehigh students. And they would all get together and travel around and do these pieces. And that started around 1976, and that lasted for a few years. John Pearson unfortunately passed away, but his late wife, Barbara Pearson, and Bridget George and Bill George started the People's Theater Company with Ricardo Vieira, who was a big part of the art scene here at Lehigh, and others, and kind of carrying on that same kind of work. And then eventually that kind of transformed into Touchstone Theatre with Bridget and Bill George and a woman named Lorraine Zeller. And in 1981, Touchstone was working out of the George's garage, touring all over with this nonverbal, universal work. And yeah.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about Touchstone until drive past it every day. Never thought to look into it.
It's still there. It's still there. A dedicated group of really committed theater artists who are still devising work, still touring work a little. I think they've been to Poland recently and other places.
Have they filled the theater with dirt since?
I don't know.
Your wife with a machete getting vines out.
Well, there's lots of cool things that are always happening there. That's for sure.
Let me ask you about the last year of your life, right? You've been brought on to Lehigh.
Wait a second. What do you mean by that?
Let's rephrase that just
We're going to murder you in the podcast. Sorry.
I have a way of phrasing things. I don't understand.
The last year of your life. How did you spend it?
Do we have an onomous? Any kind of music? Do we have any?
Let's see. What do we have?
I know how to make an entrance back from that, though.
Right? You'll be good. So you got brought onto Lehigh to teach, and then effectively schools and theaters kind of got shut down. So how's that change what you were doing with your classes, with teaching?
Sure.
Yeah. How have you adjusted? You seem pretty steadfast. So
Yeah. Well, I am, but I feel like I am with a bunch of people here, you all, and other people here in the theater Zollner community. Cassie Johnson reached out about a year and a half ago and asked if I'd been teaching at Muhlenberg and various other places, Northampton Community College's Early Childhood Development Center, working with 3 and 4-year-olds and their teachers, doing theater so that they can learn. And over at Muhlenberg, teaching a number of classes, and Cassie brought me in to do some adjunct work here with the theater department. And that turned into a year here as a visiting professor, visiting from Cherokee Street. A real privilege to do that. So COVID hit, and we had our plans. We had our plans to do these productions and everything just like normal. And Cassie got us all together and said, well, these plans aren't going to work. And so what do you all want to do? What would you do? What could you do? What can we do? What are everybody's ideas? And I sat there for a number of meetings over the summer with you 3 and a number of other professors, staff, students, everyone, and we brainstormed. And we kind of found different ideas and clustered into those ideas. And one of them was Seen and Heard. And that was great to be. Everybody just jumped in the bus that they were interested in jumping into. And
or in front of.
Yeah. So there's a moving bus. And one of them is called Just Us for All. And it's a piece about racial justice in this time and whether or not democracy really exists in this country and how that can happen. And we've got a committed group of students from Lehigh and the Lehigh professor, Joanna Grimm, who's joined us. And we have a number of students from Case Western University under the guidance of Chris Bohan, who is a Lehigh alum and worked with Cassie in back in the day, me too a little. He worked at Touchstone when he was at Lehigh. And a number of others, and we're all working together to devise a piece that investigates what's happening right now and how we can bring people together and bring more attention and create a voice for what needs to happen if we're going to really be a truly democratic country. And this is a mixed race group of people and mixed race group of leaders. And one of my goals in this piece is that the students all really, there are a number of adult professionals working with this. And one of my goals is that the students really have a platform, that we create space for them to be leaders in this as we create. We have some experience creating theater and making theater, but with a little bit of that guidance, we're really encouraging them to create something new, something that answers this moment.
That's pretty awesome. I'm excited to see how this turns out.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I kind of have a question. So it seems like you love devising and collaborating with people of like all different backgrounds. So I come from a very blue collar town. My dad and all of his brothers and all my uncles are all construction workers. Most of the people who work in my town are factory workers. So I'm really interested in the Steel Bound project because I grew up around blue collar people and I can't imagine any of them acting. So can you tell us a little bit about that whole process? You worked with actual former steelworkers, right?
Yeah. I'm getting chills as you're just describing that, Bailey, and that whole idea. So around 1995-ish, Lecoq is here during the Lecoq Festival, and we're at the Bridgeworks, which was down on New and 4th Street, kind of having a, sort of a celebration dinner with all sorts of people who were involved in the festival. And we start telling him, he was talking about, he had just gotten a tour of Centec, which is a subsidiary of Bethlehem Steel. It was a little further across, back past where Wind Creek is now. And they couldn't get into the steel mill itself, which the writing was on the wall. It was going to close by that time. People knew. But he had just gone through and seen the big ladles pouring molten steel. And he came in and he was like, l'espace, c'est génial. Yeah. And we were talking about, what happens, in 10 years from now, you'd be walking on these sidewalks and there are, we're steel workers all here. There's a steel mill that might not even be here anymore. What's it gonna be like? And how will we remember that? And so he said, il faut un chœur qui chante. It's necessary to have a chorus that sings. And he didn't mean the choir chorus of singers. He meant the Greek chorus of chanters, of the people who speak the truth to the hero. And so we started thinking, wow, after that was a great prompt. That's how he taught. He just prompted you. He gave you a little something, make something. And so we were like, yeah. And all of us in the company started like putting stuff on paper. What could we do? And it took off. And Gus Ripa he said, if you want to do a Greek play, how about Prometheus Bound? And, I didn't really tell him more. And so he told us about, Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods and gave creativity to humans. And then Zeus came and displaced him and chained him to a rock at the bottom of the world where a vulture or eagle or something keeps pecking at his liver every day. It just regenerates so he can peck it again, kind of Sisyphusian. And so what if Prometheus is a steel worker? So we found some translations of that, and we started inviting, within a year or so, steel workers to come to Touchstone for readings of Prometheus Bound. I mean, we didn't do a big production. We read it, and we wanted to see what they thought. And we worked hard to get a good translation. And also, at that point, we had pulled in Issei Barnwell, who is an amazing composer, singer, part of the group Sweet Honey in the Rock. And she came in, and we thought that she would help, bring some vocal sound to this and actually create songs and so forth out of that text. Well, anyway, people were not really excited about Prometheus. We started, reaching out to find people who had worked at the steel, sons and daughters and wives and husbands, everybody. And it didn't really ring people's chimes. And so we started thinking, how can we do this? Do we scrap this idea? And then Cy Sussman, who was at that time our producing director, said, Cornerstone Theatre, they do classics, but they rewrite them for communities. And there was in American theater, I just read about their Romeo and Juliet in a small town in Alabama, where Romeo was Black and Juliet was white. And they dealt with racism there in that town by getting the whole town to come together and do Romeo and Juliet, with the places substituted in that location. So, long story, kind of condensed. Cornerstone came in to co-produce with Touchstone. We brought in a lot of other ensemble artists from the Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble, the Irondale Theater Ensemble. Jenny Gillrain was the movement director. Bill Rausch, who is now at the Perlman Theater, which is at Freedom Tower, that has replaced the Twin Towers. And so Bill directed that, and we had 56 cast members, some of them steelworkers, who, by the way, throughout that 3 or 4 year process, started telling stories. We were reaching out. And as you might imagine, Bailey, it's so tell us a story. I don't have any stories to tell. There's no stories to tell. And if you just stay and listen and not accept that first answer, but ask a few more questions, you get some amazing stories. Stories of camaraderie, of commitment, of things that happen, and of a sense of a life, of being a part of this industry, a pride in an industry that provided so much for this country. And Allison Carey from Cornerstone was the playwright, and she came in and she adapted the music, and Issei Barnwell created some amazing songs. And we worked very closely and, patiently with Bethlehem Steel Corporation, and they let us do the piece in the iron foundry. And that took a lot of collaborative work together to really find a way to make it safe, to make it something that everyone could buy into. And it became a very, very healing story in the end for people. It kind of brought a closure, because it was sort of ripped out of people's careers, were ripped away. If you got a job at the Steel in Bethlehem, you were set for life, for generations. And all of a sudden, that wasn't the reality anymore. And so that was one of the things that piece dealt with. And what a privilege that was, and what an outstanding just experience to be seeing a chorus of women, a chorus of youth, a chorus of workers speak truth to Prometheus, who was chained and welded to a giant ladle. That was 57-ton ladle. That was our set.
That's awesome.
So you've done it all. You've been all over the world. You've acted. You've devised. You've created. You've direct. Right. You do it all. Can you pick a favorite aspect of theater, of live performance? Is it opening night and the electricity of the crowd? Is it those devising pieces that you do that you spend time working on and making, or is it? You tell me. What do you enjoy? If you can pick, I'm sure it's hard.
That's a wonderful question.
For the answer to that great question and many more, tune in to episode 2 on March 10th. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you very much to our special guest, Mark McKenna, and thank you to Lehigh University Department of Theater for sponsoring this podcast.
Make sure you're following us on social media to be alerted when new episodes are coming out.
Follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search LU Theater, that's theater ending in RE, LU Theater podcast series, and on YouTube. All of our past episodes are available on the Lehigh University Department of Theater channel.
Don't forget, Part 2 drops Wednesday, March 10th. Come check it out.